Well, didn't warn you, brother, you're gonna lose your happy home.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to The Anadromist. This is Burn Power, coming to you on a lovely fall evening here in Tbilisi, Georgia, a place which is not located in the continental United States. Well, we have another in our series of Rookmaaker lectures, this time short, about 20 minutes long, of Rookmaaker answering a question about social justice and evil. And this is from 1972, I can tell, because he's referencing what's often considered the first genocide in Burundi, related to the Hutus and the Watutsis. He kind of mixes up the names a little bit, or maybe he knows something I don't. He calls them the Tutsis and the Watutsis, but he may not have known everything. Or maybe he knows more than I do. I'm not going to question him. But anyway, that's what he's referring to. It's definitely 1972. Where this happened, I don't know. But somehow this fits today, as people are seeking for social justice, but it's so easy to slip into evil in the course of doing good. And he gets into this. This is basically one long answer to a question from someone who was at whatever the lecture he was giving was. And again, this is done with the permission of the Rookmaaker estate. I didn't sit and annotate every last line like I did with some of his other videos, but I think you'll find it interesting. You can watch or not watch or just listen. It's up to you. I've made it interesting to look at, though. But before we get there, before Rookmaaker discusses evil and social justice, watch this. It's here, rescued from Alaska. This year, my first ever book, 3 Motions. Motions is an old English word for puppet shows. Indeed, there are 3 puppet plays here written by myself for my Alaskan puppetry classes, including my versions of the medieval classic Everyman, cleverly entitled Every Puppet, and even better, my retelling of the Faust legend, updated for the 21st century, also very cleverly, with a special introductory essay on the meaning of puppetry. Now, are these 50-page booklets physically worth the $25 price? No. But this isn't about material possessions. This is about being part of this odd channel and whatever it is we're doing here, trying to understand things. And these little booklets are unique. Each one is numbered and signed by yours truly. When they sell out, they are gone. I will never reprint them. Special deals if you want multiple copies for a production of your own. Just let me know you're doing it. That's $25 for the USA, Canada, Mexico, most of Europe. There may be some corners, like, I don't know, Russia, etc., and might require some extra money, as would Asia, Latin America, and Africa, or Tonga, or Australia probably. I'll have to add another $5 or so, depending on where you're from. But part of the money goes to my assistants who are shipping these from me from their respective American and European locations. Use the links below, PayPal, GoFundMe, and make sure you add the word book, B-O-O-K, book, to let me know this is not just a normal contribution to the channel, which you can still make. This book will not last long. Help me keep the channel alive. I get no other funding except from you, the viewer. I don't get it from YouTube. I don't get sponsorships. It's up to you. If you appreciate what I do on this channel, get a book. It's a great way to remember what this channel was about, and it'll be something unique because they're all signed and numbered.
Of course, there are also rich people and poor people, and there are people who have a very bad life, and people who have many frustrations and drawbacks. People are ill, and then there are people who have a wonderful life, they have much money and a good body and everything, good brains, and so on. And then you see that people with good brains and good money and everything, they spoil their lives and doing nothing, just playing the jet set, flying from one place in the world to the other, just to do dangerous sports and run after the women and so on and so on. And at the end commit suicide, which happens often, while you see poor people doing fine. So this is a strange world. And how is it possible, if God exists, that this is true? And many people have said, well, just because of this, I don't want to accept this God because it's crazy. And I think this is a good question, a very good question, and I think it's a question we all should think about. I remember that one day, this was maybe the first time that I really came in contact with this question, which incidentally has never been my personal question. It's strange. Everybody has his personal questions, and for some people this question is important, and for other people that question is important. I had, when I was not a Christian yet, other questions. So, but this is a question which is much in the air today, just because everybody feels sense of justice is so strong today, and I think it's a good question. So I remember that one day there was a boy at my Bible class, and he began to talk like this. And then I sent something, and I let him talk. And he talked not just as I've been doing now for a couple of minutes, but he just went on and on and on. He talked about Vietnam and about the Jews during the war, and he went on and on and on about all the horrible things in this world, and all the injustices and all these awful things. And he just went on and on and on. And while he was talking, I was thinking, just try to get hold of it. And then at a certain moment I said, I know what he's saying. And so when he stopped, I said, you have forgotten quite a bit of things. You have talked about awful things, wars, about great injustices, rich people, and poor people, and so on. But why don't you talk about the poor woman on the corner of the street, or your neighbor? And when I say poor person, I don't mean somebody who is money-wise poor, but somebody who is poor just because her husband drinks too much, or goes with other women, or because his son is breaking her heart doing things that he shouldn't do, or, well, just go on, thousands of things. Just look in your own house. You don't have to go even to the neighbors. Just look at people in your very near surroundings and see the problems they have. And so why should we go that far away? Of course, it's awful if you look at what happens in a country like Vietnam, or what has happened in countries that are at war in Africa, and all the injustices that happen now. There's just one Burundi, somewhere in Africa. One tribe has almost killed a complete other tribe. Almost 1 million people just killed in a couple of days. These things happen. And just very recently, yes, this is a country. If you haven't, no, you don't read papers here, of course. Well, you have a country, and it is called Burundi. It was formerly a part of the Congo, but you know, after the Belgians left, the Congo is called now another name, and this country was a country in its own. And now in this country you have two tribes, the Tutsis and the Tutsis. And the Tutsis, if I have it wrong, I'm sorry, because I never get these names right, but the Tutsis are not very intelligent and are small people, and the Tutsis are big people and have brains. And they are the people who have conquered this country so many centuries ago and made these Tutsis into their slaves. so the Tutsis are their slaves. Now the Tutsis are much more numerous than these Watutsis, and they made a kind of democracy there. But the democracy, of course, is not so nice for the Watutsis, because now the Tutsis get in power. So what do? So they suppress them. So what do if you are suppressed? So one day, these Tutsis, that's about a month ago, they made a kind of revolt, upheaval, and as all upheavals and revolts in Africa, they killed many people, 10,000. And then the Watutsis spoke back, and they just did it like this, that there was a school, and then they said to the Watutsi teacher, there's a Tutsi teacher in the school, you shoot him, and when this man was shot, the soldiers came and they all the children in the school, because they were all Tutsi children, and they were killed. And so within 1 week they had killed all the leaders and the possible leaders, everybody who had some education, so that there are some old women and some old men left and some very small children, and nobody was anything like any possibility to be anything in the state is killed. This has just happened. Things like that happen. Well, you hear about these things, and it's awful. And it's not only awful because it's war, but it's awful because it's completely unjust. It's awful because you feel this is something that you cannot do. You cannot live. Who is wrong, the Tutsis or the Watutsis? Well, both are completely wrong, and both have been very unjust, even if the Watutsis have been more unjust than the Tutsis, if I hear this story. Okay, this is what happens. But we must think these things are awful, but they happen in your near surroundings. Somebody who doesn't get the praise he needs, or somebody who gets too much praise. Many injustices in this world. Well, if you think about this, and this is what I was thinking about when this boy was talking, I said, just go on and talk about these seemingly simple things, but somebody really suffers. And maybe this woman on the corner, whose husband is drinking, has a suffering which is of no comparison to somebody in Bangladesh whose husband is killed in front of her, and who is raped herself, and her children have been, etc., etc. But well, some things go deeper spiritually than other things, so maybe you don't know who can make measurements of suffering, who suffers most. These are very difficult things. But when he was talking like this, and I was thinking about this, about all this suffering and so on, something came into my mind, and it was this. Now you say, if God exists, then he couldn't look at these things, and this is impossible. And now I think the wonderful thing about the Bible is that this is exactly what God says. So when the boy had finished, I said, do you know what happened? All this time you were talking, Christ was standing beside of you, and he's saying, that's exactly what I have been saying. This is exactly why I came, because I can't see it. I can't accept a world in which all these awful things are. I made a good world, God made a good world, a perfect world, and then man in his foolishness and sin made this awful place out of it. But God does not accept it. And that's exactly why Christ came. So if we feel, this cannot be, this is awful, this is unjust, this is unacceptable, we must know that the person, and I say deliberately, the person that set this before us was God. Now we can say, I don't accept. What does it mean if I say I don't accept? Nothing, because I can't change the world. Of course I can kill a couple of million rich people if I get the power. I can kill a couple of thousand people, a couple of million people in order to make a better world, just like a man like Lenin did. I think and this is an awful thing to think about. This is what always happens. You get a great idealist, and he says there's so much injustice in this world, you got to make a better world. And then it ends always in killing people. So after the Russian Revolution, Lenin was in power. And Lenin is a man who was known and is known to be very soft-hearted. He really, literally couldn't kill a fly. He was too soft-hearted for it. But after the revolution, in order to make a beautiful Russia, a country with justice, out of this grew the fact that a couple of million people were killed. Just because, you see, they are too rich, or they are too this, or they are too that. And in order to have our perfect world, these people cannot be. So the end of our work is always killing, in order to have our perfectness, our idea about a good world, our feelings. But Christ did it differently. He couldn't see this, he couldn't accept it, but we can in a way say, I don't want it, and it's completely frustration. How can I change this world? I'm a small human being. Or I can say, I can do it, and I can kill many people, and I try to force a new world, and the end is frustration again, and deception, because you see in the end that it doesn't work. Russia has not become a perfect world, and after all, there are only a couple of million people killed. And nothing has been changed, really and very deep. So, but Christ is different because he's God. And so that's why he came and he said, I don't accept. And I think that we must realize that Christ just came for these things. And he said, I want to redeem this world. I will give a solution to the problem. But he knew that all our thinking, and I think this, we got to say two things. First, all our thinking about injustices and suffering is inadequate. Whatever picture you make about all the suffering in the world and all the injustice in the world, it's a too small a picture. Our picture is too small because we don't take into account the little sufferings, because we consider them little in this person or that person, and we don't consider the little injustices that this person, little children in school, they are cruel to each other. You don't have to look at people like Lenin. Just little children in school, they can be so cruel. What is more cruel, to kill 1 million people, or just to take away from somebody something that he really, really loves? Or just to say to a little boy, your father is a fool. And the boy is so proud of his father. What is more? Who can measure this? I think God can, and he knows. And he brings it all into account. So he has a much better picture. And while we look at each other, you see, everybody in this room, almost everybody, is a normal person. And we can look at each other, and we can even enjoy looking at each other. But, you know, there are people who have contorted faces, people who are spastic and they walk in an awful way. Well, you have all seen people like that, and sometimes it's very hard to look at it. Well, it's awful. Well, I think sometimes that if God looks at us, we are all crazy, spastic, contorted, awful to look at, because we're much less than we should be. So God sees us much better than we do, and so the awfulness, the horribility of this world is much more horrible than we ever think about it. We in a way got accustomed to it, and we think it's normal, but it isn't. God knows what's normal. That's one thing. So, and then the second thing is that all our solutions, human solutions, are always too small. How can we change this world? By killing a few thousand, few million, few billion people? Can we, by killing 2 billion people, make this world perfect? If we could, I would say let's kill the 2 billion. But I think it doesn't work. To begin with, if you kill 2 billion people, you have created such an injustice again by killing 2 billion people that you have created new injustice. So it doesn't help. Even if you think it helps, just by doing it, you would have done the opposite. So it doesn't help. And what can you do? Preach, go around, talk, give your personal life, go to the stake. Of course you can do all these things sometimes, but it's all small. You're human, and the world will go on, and nothing will change, basically. But I think if Christ comes, if God himself comes, he knows how deep and how awful the thing is, but he knows that the solution should be a very big one. An immensely big one. And the solution is not just kill a few people, and the solution is not just wear all red hats, let's all wear blue hats, or let's all wave a flag of this color, or read all little Mao's book, or whatever kind of solution. I think all these solutions and even all these solutions together are no solutions. And so God knew there is only one very, very deep, immensely deep and enormous thing is needed to change this world again. And that's the gospel, that Christ came, being the Son of God, that God said there's only one solution, that's the sacrifice of God himself. So, in a way, when we say, how can God accept this? He can't accept it. If he cannot have made this world. And he says, yes, he made a perfect world, and we made this rotten place of it. But you know that God really had all these awfulness things on his shoulder. We blame God, but God took the blame already. And that's what happened on the cross. He said, pull all the blame of this world on me, and I will redeem it. And I will suffer for it. So it's not just a little human suffering, but it's God suffering himself in order to make it possible that we have a perfect world. Question next. There is not a perfect world today. Yes, we know. And of course, we must understand, but I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but in the first place that the world is much better than it ever was before. And if we talk about all these injustices, it is just because we have a chance to talk about it. When you were a slave 2 centuries, 4 centuries, 10 centuries ago, and you just were happy that you had something to eat, you had no time to talk about all these people killed far, far away. What do you think that somebody in Bangladesh is talking about? He isn't talking about Jews doing the war of Vietnamese people. It's so near. And you're happy that you exist, that's all. Because that's the only thing that you have. So, in a way, it is just because we are in such a happy world that we feel all these injustices so strong. Just because, well, the better you have it, the more you feel what you don't have. This is very human. So I think in a way, just the reason that we are in such a complaining situation is maybe just because we have it so good. So we must understand this, that we have it really good, maybe better than anybody had before in the world. That's one thing. And the second thing is that Christ didn't come back yet. And the coming back of Christ is the final solution. And that's why we look forward to it. If Christ comes, all the things that he has done will be fulfilled. Then we will have the final justice. Then we will have the clean world. Why doesn't he come back? That's a long story, a difficult question. But the end answer is very easy, because God said it's not time yet. I want to have more people. I want to save more people. I want to have, well, there are some things to do still, and he knows. And so in a way, if you love God, you trust him, you say, God, come soon. But he has it in his hands. Maybe he is coming soon. But then that's why we're working for justice today, and it is a sensible and meaningful act today to work for justice and towards justice, because it's on the basis of the finished work of Christ, and it's looking ahead to the final justice that is coming. So that's why I think that if somebody begins to say, oh, I don't believe that God, you say that's wrong. You know that God is complaining with you, and God said it's unacceptable. So it's not you who is saying it's unacceptable, God said it. But he did something. He didn't talk, but he did something. More than we ever can understand even. And that's exactly the gospel. We often make the gospel too cheap. We talk about, oh yes, you are a sinner. And so your sins have to be washed out. And therefore, in order to be saved, you have to accept Jesus Christ. This is the gospel that is presented to many people in this world. And it's not a non-gospel. It's not a false gospel, but it's the smaller gospel. The gospel is much more. It talks about all these things in the world, and it's much more than just to have our little souls in heaven. That Christ died, he wanted to have a just world, and he wanted to change the things that we all long for, that it will be changed. So I think that we must take the gospel in the right place. It's much more than saving little souls, but it is saving the world, it's redeeming the world, or it's protesting against all the injustices, but a protest which is much deeper than any human protest, because there's a solution offered. I think that we must understand is the gospel. Christine, where are you? Is that an answer to your question? Have you understood it? So think about it, and if you have a question, please come again. But at this moment, no questions anymore. Don't be afraid. No? Okay. So think about it. And I think it's very important. Anybody else? At this point, I want to go on with something else. But
So there you are. Rookmaaker's discussion of evil and social justice. One thing I've learned about evil, and if you look around here somewhere, you'll probably see me talking about it in other videos, and one that's quite near this one as well. One thing that I've realized is that evil is often very close to love, just as the good things, the best things inside of us, are very close to the worst things inside of us. They're like sides of a coin, and it's very hard to get rid of them. But as Solzhenitsyn said, that would be funny. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, the line between good and evil runs down through every human heart. And even in the worst of us, there is still a bit of good. And even in the best of us, there's still a bit of evil. So we really have to watch ourselves. And I think that's what Rookmaaker was communicating as well. Buy a book. That's all I'm going to say. Links below. And I guess that's it. We have some more Rookmaaker material, which we will slowly be getting out. This was a short one, so I thought, let's get this out. I need to get some things out. And thanks for watching the channel. Subscribe, press like, try to get the algorithm to notice me, or at least notice Rookmaaker. From Tbilisi, Georgia, this is Byrne saying Nachwamdis, which is goodbye, and Droibit, which means, just a little while. We'll be separate, but then we'll get back together.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.